Welcome to Rising. I'm sure Michael Singleton filling in for Amber Athey. I'm excited to be joined remotely again by Jessica Burbank. How are you, Jess?
Doing well. Good to be back in action, sure, Michael.
Absolutely. Look, Jess, there's a lot to sort of unpack here. We've got some big news in the Trump world, don't we?
We do. The former president touched down in Atlanta yesterday, where he surrendered to officials at the Fulton County Jail on charges related to attempting to overturn the state's 2020 election results. Trump's long-awaited mugshot hit the internet to much expected fanfare from both his supporters and his detractors. The former president predictably wasted no time in slapping the image onto campaign merch available for purchase on his 2024 website.
Now, Trump also took advantages of last night's circus to make a big splash on Twitter, where he posted for the first time since his account was banned in January 2021. The former president called into Newsmax after his surrender last night. Let's listen in.
Absolute horrible thing that they're doing, and I've never seen anything like it. This is third world country, and I really believe they're getting hit by it. You know, there were tremendous crowds in Atlanta, and they were so friendly, but this is a radical left district attorney, as we have in New York and as we have in all the other places, whether it's district attorney or AGs, we have that in New York. They're going after all for nothing. I mean, the AG case, they have no case against me at all. They do it to try and get elected, but they also do it in coordination with the Department of Injustice in Washington. Terrible thing. Never happened before.
Never happened before, Jess. I mean, there's sort of a lot to unpack here. You know, some networks last night sort of ridiculed the president about his weight, about his height. You know, is he really 215 pounds or more? Many of those same networks also didn't cover his remarks, but they blasted the mugshot all over the place, causing some to say, well, see, here you go. These folks are clearly biased against the former president. But I have this opinion, Jess. I think that this will actually help the former president. I was looking at some numbers here from the 2020 election. I was looking at Wisconsin, where Biden won by 20,000 votes. Arizona, 10,000 votes. Georgia, 14,000 votes. Nevada, 35,000 votes. And so when you tally all of this up, you see a razor-thin margin where Biden flipped a little more than 81,139 votes merely across 4 states. That's it. That's the only reason he won the election. You're talking about less than 100,000 votes. I'm not convinced that Trump can't mathematically supersede that in 2024. And I think this only charges up his base. I think you have to factor in the state of the economy. You have to factor in crime. You have to factor in Americans' position on the Ukraine-Russian proxy war changing. All of those variables are going to matter and have a significant impact next year. And also, let's not forget, once President Biden gets back on the campaign trail, how is he perceived by voters? Is he perceived as someone who can carry the mantle for an additional 4 years, or will many within his base be unenthusiastic and decide to stay home, which all benefits the former president?
Yeah, I think this is not something that should be taken as a political indictment, because it's not. It was a grand jury determining if Donald Trump committed very specific crimes. Did he try and overturn the election explicitly? Did he ask other people to commit crimes on his behalf? He was asking people to find votes that he knew very well he did not earn. They're going to have to prove that that was his state of mind at the time that he was asking folks to find those votes. But at the end of the day, it's not a calculation you make. Will this bolster his campaign? Will this embolden his base? It's a decision you have to make as a district attorney, whether you're in Fulton County, whether you're the Attorney General Merrick Garland, to say, okay, someone tried to overturn a democratic election in the United States. They knew very well that the election was fair, that Joe Biden won not by a long shot, but won fairly. And you have to say, are we going to let people who lose elections in the United States attempt to overturn them? Are we going to enforce the law when they attempt to collude to have the Democratic electors cast ballots in a direction that they didn't have the popular votes for? And so I think, yeah, maybe it will embolden his base. Maybe it will not change the ultimate turnout of the general election. But this is really about establishing rule of law and protecting democracy in the United States.
Yeah, I certainly agree in terms of protecting the rule of law and protecting democracy, but I think it's sort of hard for many Republican voters, particularly Trump supporters, to dismiss the political realities of this. The guy is running for president again. All of these indictments are coming in the midst of a presidential cycle. There, at least in my knowledge or estimation, I don't believe there's a statute of limitations that expire within the next year or two. So in the mind of many Trump supporters, why do this now? Why not 2 years ago? Why not do this after the election is over? Give voters the opportunity to decide what direction they want the country to go, by whom they ultimately choose to lead the country for the next 4 years. So I think it's a bit cavalier to try to dismiss the politics of this. I don't think you can.
Yeah, I have the same question there as far as timeline goes. I think Merrick Garland wasted time by not immediately launching an investigation into Donald Trump. I think Fanni Willis and not establishing the grand jury the day after Donald Trump was caught making these claims and these text messages were made public. The January 6th committee wrapped up at the end of last summer, and we still had quite a bit of time before we heard about these indictments coming forth against Donald Trump. So I do agree that the timeline was pretty bad. I do think Trump's messaging here is something I want to talk about. How he says that Fanni Willis is a radical left DA. For anyone to say that a prosecutor can be on the radical left is insane. Anyone on the radical left is so critical of the United States justice system that they would have a hard time even partaking in it as a public defender. If anyone in the criminal justice system in the United States that participates on a day-to-day basis is a member of the radical left, it's going to be a public defender. It's not going to be a district attorney or a prosecutor enforcing laws that many members of the radical left don't believe in. So this idea that neoliberals in the United States are members of the radical left is a part of a larger effort of Donald Trump and the Republican Party right now to further the country on the political spectrum to the right. If you look at the political spectrum in the United States, our middle is considered the far right in any other country by their standards of politics. And so I just think we need to call that out when we see it. For them to call someone who I think would be on the far right in any other country a member of the radical left is just an effort to skew the political spectrum in the United States.
I mean, Fanni Willis is elected. She ran as a Democrat in Fulton County, which is a heavily Democratic-leaning city. I went to college there, Morehouse College. I lived in Atlanta for 4 years. I mean, outside of going to Buckhead, there aren't really many Republicans in the city. And so I think what Trump is trying to communicate to his voters is that I'm not being prosecuted here by an objective arbiter. And while I believe that someone can be a Republican or a Democrat and still attempt to be as neutral as possible, a candor would also oblige me to say that all human beings have bias. And there is a history with Fanni Willis of utilizing her politics in many ways and being rebuked by a judge by doing so. Let's keep that in mind. This isn't someone that has a completely clean slate here. And I'm not attempting to attack her. From my understanding, she's a very competent and capable district attorney and has done a pretty good job in the past. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that there is indeed evidence in her past that could showcase to many voters that this is someone who is not an objective spectator here. This is someone that may indeed be doing this because of some of their political partisanship or partisan beliefs, if you will, in terms of Donald Trump and Republicans overall. I'm not saying that that's true, but I can see how many can draw that conclusion.
I think that's why it's important to remember that it wasn't Willis who indicted Donald Trump, that it was a grand jury of citizens in Fulton County in Georgia. And these people were just randomly selected to serve on this jury. There's a voir dire process to ensure for everyone that they're not having biased jurors on the case. And so this indictment didn't come from a biased district attorney. This indictment came from everyday citizens in Fulton County, where Donald Trump tried to overturn the election. So I think that's a really important piece of information to remember when we think of the Fulton County grand jury. Now, to have the Fulton County jurors' identities released on far-right websites, I think is a dangerous element of this case that is now going to make a lot of DAs, I think, call into question whether or not they should have a grand jury indictment for political cases of this nature, even if it's the right thing to do, considering the risk to the jurors that's at hand, and that jurors might be very unwilling to serve if this risk at this level to have their name, address, and personal information posted and to receive violent threats from people who support Donald Trump or whoever a defendant might be in a future case. I think that element in this suggests that Trump's base is emboldened to question the rule of law, to question our democratic process whenever there's an outcome that doesn't favor them. To have a grand jury assembled to simply assess what they were directed to assess, which was, did Donald Trump attempt to overturn the election? Did he ask other people to commit crimes? It wasn't a case about free speech that Fanni Willis is now cracking down on Trump, telling him he can't say things, him claiming, everything I said was perfectly legal, I made a perfect phone call. That's not what the grand jury decided on. They decided on, did Donald Trump commit the crime of asking other people to overturn the election, which is illegal. It's not protected by free speech.
Yeah, look, I agree with you that we certainly don't want to put jurors at risk or their families or communities, but there is a such thing as pretrial bias. There is a such thing as cognitive bias, and it's why some defendants can make a legitimate argument to or before a court to move the case somewhere else so that they have a fair shot by being able to pull from a more diverse jury pool. And I think Donald Trump is going to have a pretty strong case to make in this regard. I mean, the guy is known all over the place. It's kind of hard to, at least in my opinion, to find someone who's in the gray on Donald Trump, and that is to say that someone who's a neutral. They don't have an opinion on Donald Trump, positive or negatively. I don't think that person really exists. But I mentioned this earlier over on MSNBC last night. Rachel Maddow and crew ridiculed the former president over his alleged booking measurements. Let's listen in.
It's like, do they actually measure him? Do they put him on a scale? It's not like going to the veterinarian. They do not actually make you stand on the scale. But he's listed as a white male. His hair color is listed as blonde or strawberry.
Is that a nice way to say orange?
Blonde or strawberry. His eye color is listed as blue. His height is listed as 6'3", and his weight is listed
175.
215.
6'3", 215, people pointed out as the exact dimensions of Lamar Jackson, the quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know if the control room has a Lamar Jackson.
I mean, the resemblance is uncanny.
It is.
And if that's what you're trying to say, I think.
Pod. He's in a pod.
I feel like an hour and 20 minutes ago, I said the whole thing is a sham. The whole thing, up to the weight. And I believe 24 hours ago,
up to the height.
When we were together, I said, I bet he's not at the debate because he's fasting. Now, even if he fasted, there's no way. And Mark Meadows had to also self-report his height and weight. He clocked in at 240.
Honestly.
There's no way Trump is 25 pounds lighter than Meadows.
I mean, who cares about this? I have to be honest with you. Most people do not want to admit or acknowledge their actual weight. I'm just being honest. I mean, heck, I'm 5'7". Now, sometimes I might try to lie and say I'm 5'8" or 5'9". I'm just being honest. This is normal. So the fact that they're bringing this up is a bit ludicrous to me.
I don't know. Some people like to have fun. They like to have a good time, Shermichael. They like to joke around. I don't think Donald Trump is actually 6'3" and 215. It's funny that he put that down because it shows that someone who is president of the United States is so insecure about this most basic thing. It's just a bit of a read into his psyche, in my perspective. I think people lie about their height and weight all the time, but for the president to do it when he's being taken in for his indictment and paying his $200,000 bail that he agreed to, it's just kind of funny.
I mean, hey, Donald Trump isn't any different than anybody else. Maybe he is a little insecure with his weight. Many Americans are. In fact, many Americans are obese. We're one of the most obese modern countries in the world. So I'm not necessarily surprised that Donald Trump wouldn't want to tell his whole weight or his actual weight. I'm not going to hold that against him. And I think many Americans, even those who don't like the guy, will look at that and say, well, heck, I don't want people knowing my real weight either.
Yeah, I'm actually 6'4" and about 175 pounds, Shermichael. So
well, look,
no one should fact check me on
in my mind, I'm 5'11" or 5'12" like my brother. I'm not, but that's what I would love to tell people. I wish I could add those couple inches.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump, I love that he tweeted out the Microsoft Word version of a meme of his indictment. He made himself a little flyer. Graphic design is his passion. The way he put election interference right under his mugshot on what he tweeted out, I think is hilarious. I think the way that he's processing all of this is he's trying to take it with stride. He's trying to post through it. And I don't know, I think his approach of just not addressing this stuff would go much better than if he was posting his own mugshot to try and take ownership of it and post a link to his website so people can donate to the campaign. It's just a weird approach, I think, to a legitimate political process of having him run for public office to be taken out of the debates because he says he won't ultimately endorse the Republican candidate, and it goes against their party rules for him to participate in the debate if he will not promise to ultimately support the candidate. Clearly, he doesn't support the party. And then you have the legal process of him being accused of things, and he wants to win in the court of public opinion and say things like, well, they're trying to silence me. They're trying to make it so that he doesn't influence the judicial process. He's saying things like, the whole time I believed that, I won the election. I never believed once that I lost the election. He just is trusting that his base will not look into this and find the text messages where he admits that he knows he lost and wants other people to find the votes for him. I just don't think posting through it is helping him. I think people are laughing at him and not with him.
Yeah, see, I see this differently. I think it is going to help. I think he is going to raise a significant amount of money. I think his base will indeed get excited and charged up about this. And here's the thing, when you look at the numbers on this, Donald Trump is not going to flip Democrats, right? Some of those swing voters, suburban voters who are principally concerned with abortion are not going to all of a sudden vote for Donald Trump no matter what. But on the other side, Joe Biden cannot risk to see any level of decrease among any of his key demo groups, whether that's young voters, whether that's black voters, specifically black men. You have to keep in mind young black voters. You also have to remember you have Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. also running. What percent of the vote do they take in some of those swing states? And there are also about 30% of Americans who don't really vote at all. And Donald Trump, one thing that he has showcased in 2016 and even again in 2020 is that he does have the ability to turn those people out. And so I think when you look at all of those variables, I'm just not willing to say that Donald Trump cannot be reelected. And I think a part of what he's doing with the messaging and the marketing of saying, look at what they're doing to me. A lot of Americans distrust the judicial system. A lot of Americans do believe that district attorneys overcharge. We know this for a fact. And I think that there is a case potentially to make to some people who are sort of sitting on the outside here to get into that. But more rising right after this.